Hello, thank you for joining us. This is Beyond Belief Sobriety, a podcast and community for people who are seeking or who have found a secular path to recovery from addictions of all kinds. If you're new to our YouTube channel, please take a look around. We've been podcasting about addiction recovery since September of 2015. All of our episodes are here on our YouTube channel, plus some other videos that you might find interesting. Glad to have you here. If you like it, please subscribe. So today we're going to be talking about sugar addiction, and my guest is Mike Collins. He was actually on this podcast back in 2019. It was episode 115, and at that time we were known as AA Beyond Belief. So it is so good to have him back today. He knows his stuff when it comes to sugar and processed food addictions, and I'm going to let him tell you all about it. Welcome, Mike. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate having me back. I really appreciate it. I guess I'm excited to share with the folks. I've been recently talking about the community that we're growing, and you just would not believe that the fastest growing segment of the community are people already in recovery from drugs and alcohol who now want to put down sugar.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
You know, I think it's the social acceptability. I think it's, you can give this to a 1-year-old with no legal, moral, ethical worries. And, some of the support meetings seem to be how shall I say, not a safe place for a food addict.
Right. That's for sure. That's for sure. In fact, there used to be some really bad advice given in AA, and I don't know if it is anymore, about to eat sugar in the beginning of your recovery, which is not really a good idea.
It's in the big book twice. It is. Yeah, it's kind of sad, really. The science, we didn't know the science back then, and it does.
No, that's true.
It truly is like a Suboxone, a methadone. It's a little bit of a step down, from the alcohol. So, yeah.
And I think that, all of us have probably, if we think back early enough in our childhood, some of our earliest memories might have to do with sugar. I know that some of mine certainly do. Yeah. And I remember talking to you about this back in 2019. My memories are of probably as a 4-year-old kid putting sugar on top of already sugary cereal.
Yeah, I know. Me too. We all grew up that way, John. We all
did.
For sure. Absolutely. And it's, again, I have nothing against the sugar manufacturers. No one knew, to be honest.
That's true.
We do this big summit every year, and talk with all the experts and researchers and MDs and everything. And, the science in the last 3 to 5 years has just exploded. I mean, just crazy amounts of real, true, peer-reviewed studies about what's going on with sugar in the human body. So it's been, it's good, and moreover, how we intersect it, meaning the addiction community. I have noticed that the ketogenic diet folks have all started to include food addiction speakers on their stages and in their summits.
Isn't that interesting?
It's really wild because they can't execute the diets they can get a little bit of ways in, lose a couple pounds, but they always fall back to the sugar addiction, which is, I think we may have talked about it. It was literally the original gateway drug, and the science is proving that now.
Yeah. And, we did talk about that. And I remember just before speaking with you, I spoke with Tommy Rosen, and he himself said that sugar was his first drug.
Yeah, absolutely. Tommy was on one of the last summit, actually. And he's a big proponent of the idea that sugar was the original thing that changed our state. It was more unconscious. It is more unconscious because of its ubiquity, because of its cultural acceptance for children. We don't realize that we're numbing ourselves a little bit. If we're a little afraid, a little scared, a little worried, a little lonely, we have a little bit of sugar and it goes away. but we don't like put the two and two together because it is so ubiquitous and so free around. You know, it's like we can always score some.
Right.
So, and we don't like think, well, you think I want a cookie, not that I'm sad, or, you know what I mean? It's like, it really is and the recovery is, how do you uncouple those two things, you know?
Do you include processed foods with sugar?
Absolutely. Ultra processed carbs turn into sugar in your stomach.
Gotcha. Okay.
Grains. Sometimes I get a little pushback on even dried fruit and fruit juices. You know, fructose is fructose. The molecule doesn't change.
Right.
And that's the one that's affecting the dopamine receptors, all of the feel good chemicals, even your your opioid receptors in your body. I mean, literally, it's not much different. Your body is screaming for the stuff because it gives that same warm feeling. No, look, by the time we're adults, we're not chasing that warm feeling. We're just fighting off withdrawals. We don't have time for withdrawals,
Yeah.
They can be nasty,
I wonder if you could help us out a little bit by just sharing your personal journey through, sugar addiction, how you realized that you had a problem, what you did to get help, and then, through the journey that you're on now.
Yeah, happy to. It actually goes back a couple generations, and it tracks with what we were talking about. My mother was my favorite sugar junkie. I mean, my mom, my grandmother died when she was only 8 years old. Okay. And when she passed away, they had to move in. My grandfather and her moved in with my great aunt. She was the youngest, and everybody else was out of the house, and moved in with my great aunt. But they owned almost like a whole area. It was like literally a rural hospital. But across the street, cousin Jim owned it wasn't a convenience store back then. It was a general store. And they made a deal. My grandfather and cousin Jim, anytime my mother walked into that store, she could have anything she wanted and just put it on his tab. And so it was kind of like my mother literally grew up believing sugar was love. I'm pretty sure she passed away believing that. Okay. And I grew up exactly like you grew up, like putting sugar on sugar soup, on sugary cereal, and literally be scraping half an inch of sugar on the bottom with the milk.
That's right. I remember that.
Right. That was the best part, milk and sugar basically. And it was just crazy. And, we used to make bread and butter and sugar sandwiches.
Yes, we did that.
Yep. Kool-Aid with like 3 times the mixture, not just 1 cup, but 3.
Right.
It was like green sugar or red sugar, whatever. It was crazy. And so, I didn't realize that it was changing my state. I mean, no one does.
No.
Until we separate them and show them this, that it doesn't compute. But here's what happened. About 14 or 15, I ran into beer. And beer, I knew changed my state. I was kind of shy. I could drink behind the high school and talk to girls at the dance. Well, that led to, well, you know what it led to. It led to what I'll do the math, 14 years of craziness. And I got sober at 28, right? And I could talk about any of that. I'm happy to. Kind of an open book about that. But when I did get sober at 28, I literally went right back to the sugar. Mm-hmm. And it was literally, it was pizza and pasta. I didn't eat any real food. It was all ultra processed carbs. They used to call me the Mountain Dew man. Like I would drink 8 16-ounce returnable bottles. They called me the Mountain Dew man at the store every single day. And I'd come back, get my other 8-pack for the day, like that. And it was crazy. And so anyway, I went on and I read a book. I was trying to get healthy, and after I got sober, called Sugar Blues. And Sugar Blues was written by a guy named William Duffy. And Duffy ended up marrying Gloria Swanson, the famous movie star, right?
Yeah.
And they promoted that book in the late 70s and early 80s. That's when I got it. I've been sober 37 years. So when I got sober, I read the book, right? And so I raised this was the craziest thing. I met a woman in recovery. We had twins, And somehow after reading this book and, studying a little, I talked her into having kids, no sugar, no flour, no caffeine in the womb, or it lasted till they were 6 years old. And that experiment was, I mean, I could go into detail about it, but it worked. I mean, my children's brain developed better. Okay. And I'm talking, uh, perfect scores on their college entrance exams, which is nearly impossible. You know what I mean? And it was it's nothing I did. I'm not that smart. And, it just, I went on to have a regular business career after that. I didn't like dwell on it, but the kids grew up in a strange environment and they said, Dad, you should write a book someday. So I did write a book, and it was on Amazon 2018. And I bought sugaraddiction.com in like 08 or 09 or something. And while I was still working, I was still putting out good information. But it wasn't until the last 4 or 5 years when I started to coach and grow this community that we have now, the platform, the Zoom meetings, all that kind of stuff, that I really started to deeply understand this is an important part of the process. This is a substance use disorder recovery. It has nothing almost to do with food. It has nothing to do with chocolate or soda. Yes, you have to get an abstinence and try and keep the abstinence. But the way that you keep the abstinence is not willpower or white knuckling, just like any other addiction recovery, substance use disorder recovery. It's all about, finding out maybe what the trauma was, finding out how to deal with your emotions differently, better, in a different way that doesn't include a substance. So it's been an adventure. It's kind of turned into the sugar-free man there, wherever that is. And it's just been a labor of love, to be honest with you. It's been something where people, if I tell them, spend 5 minutes in my inbox, 5 minutes on my instant messenger, or just get on one of the calls where people call me for coaching, where 20% of them are crying because they're 100, 200, 300 pounds overweight. They just can't stop. They know what they need to do, but they can't stop. And the reason they can't stop is because they never think of it as an addiction, a deep addiction.
Right.
They think of it as, a diet thing, a weight,
right.
an exercise thing. So,
and probably feel guilty or that they're somehow at fault for their situation.
Oh, absolutely. The stigmatization of weight and the failure to keep a promise to yourself every morning.
It's hard, yeah.
Drinking and drugging, I'll quit today now. No, I'll quit tomorrow, whatever. Same thing here. And by 4 o'clock, you're back in it, whatever it is. So, yeah, it's, and again, the largest thing that I've discovered is this is a substance use disorder recovery, and sugar does not get the respect of the other drugs. It's a very well-known construct in the world of alcohol and drug recovery. In treatment, if you started using drugs and alcohol at 14 or 15 years old, you stop growing emotionally. Yeah. Very well known, very well understood. Think about this now, back to the womb or back to 1 or 2 years old, where your entire childhood, your parents even did it to you, They didn't have time. They'd give you a cookie and send you to the TV if you were crying or upset or scared or lonely. And it's not computing. And now what's happening is the science is proving what happened, and now we're able to fix the problem, hopefully, slowly.
Yeah. I've spoken with doctors before who have described this as just any other substance use disorder. It does the same thing as you mentioned in the brain, getting the dopamine spikes and the like. So tell me this, what would a person who is ready to go off sugar, what would they experience?
The withdrawals, I like to tell them, think nicotine, not heroin,
Oh, yeah. And that's hard.
Yeah, that's really hard. One of the harder ones, but it's real.
Yeah.
And if you got any habit at all, and if you try and do caffeine at the same time, which we recommend because it's wired together, fired together, right?
I've heard that.
Yeah, they're hitting the same chemical reward systems, dopamine, serotonin. And when I
I've
say,
heard that. You know, I
yeah,
used to hear the advice when I was first getting sober that when I smoked, don't quit smoking and drinking at the same time.
yeah,
That's the wrong advice. I hear now that you really should stop both at the same time.
it is difficult. If you do power, sugar, and caffeine at the same time, in day 3, you're going to be incapacitated. Okay.
Mm,
You're going to not be able to get out of bed. You're going to have a pounding headache. You're going to be
God.
starving. You're going to be, lethargy. You're going to be irritable and depressed. And it's not a depressed where you need to go get antidepressants. It's a physical depression. Your dopamine, and when I say dopamine, I mean norepinephrine, GABA, serotonin, oxytocin, your adrenals, your opioid receptors, all of these feel goods in your body are affected by sugar. And so when you stop those thinned out receptors, there's less of them. You're not manually hitting them. You're not manually pumping them. And obviously there's going to be a little bit of an upset for a time, but it's not, it's not undoable. It's not
Right.
unmanageable. You can get to the other side. Sometimes, depending on your habit, it takes 10, 15 days, sometimes even 30, but the sun will come out eventually, right? And then the real work starts. Actually, I like to say it starts during, because the common refrain is, I'm losing my
Oh,
mind,
I bet. Hmm.
because all of a sudden you're raw to these emotions, both everyday stressors of life and finance and kids and everything, and the old trauma that might start to bubble up or surface, right? Which we're all familiar with in recovery stuff. So yeah, it takes about the arc of a podcast, the arc of a summit interview or something, to kind of piece all this together. And the exciting part for me, as I mentioned before, is that I believe the recovery community holds the key to the metabolic syndrome obesity crisis that we have in the world today, because they understand the addiction piece of the puzzle, right? They understand this part of it. When I bring someone in who just wants to lose weight, that person makes it or breaks it on their willingness to accept the fact that they have an addiction. And hopefully, fingers crossed, the addiction community is already there, and I don't have to drag them across that finish line.
Yeah, the community aspect has always been important to me from the very beginning and still is. I wonder, if you can talk a bit about the community that you have today and how you've built that and where you might like to see it going and how does it work?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I appreciate it. So we have about 20,000 people in
My
one
goodness.
forum.
Wow.
And, and like you'd imagine, most of them are new people.
Yep.
But then as they move on, we have other forums that are more advanced. We have 2, soon to be 3 Zoom meetings every single day that are staffed by facilitators trained by me. And they're trained in addiction recovery. We have health coaches, don't get me wrong. And at the beginning, I really wanted it to be kind of 50-50 health coaching and substance use disorder recovery stuff. But in reality, it's starting to shift. It's more like 70% substance use disorder. People do need some guidance on eating whole food. They know they need to eat whole
Yeah,
food.
it's really not easy, is it?
No, it's not. Not in this society.
Mm-mm.
85% of the food in the grocery store has sugar in boxes, bags, cans, takeout, everything. It's insane, really. It's hard for, you talk about the construct in 12-step or other recoveries of eternal vigilance. This eternal vigilance is, you can put the plug in the jug, but you got to walk this tiger 3 times a day. You got to
Right.
figure out what to eat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And it's difficult when you're looking at a society that's immersed in it. So, yeah.
So do you have like a defined kind of program that people should follow, or do you help people kind of find their own path? How do
We
you
have
navigate that?
a 30-day detox. The core of our group, it's almost like the ticket to the game is the original abstinence that you would obtain.
Yeah.
And that's a 30-day detox where I come into your inbox every day with a video and a lesson that's between 10 and 20 minutes long. And you just watch that video. The first week is just a prep week. You don't even have to start detoxing. But the next 21 days, I walk you through what to expect, when what we were talking about before,
Okay.
so that they're not like surprised.
Yeah.
They're like nervous and anxious and irritable and, you know, moody and sleepy and hungry. I mean, all these kind of things happen all at once. And, you know, people, like I said, they're a little weepy sometimes. They don't understand why they're crying even.
Oh,
It's because they're starting to feel again. And so, yeah, so we walk you through that. And then the second part of it is, after 30 days at your own count, we have a detox to lifestyle program. And that has like 100 videos in it of all of our old summits, educators, you know, MDs, PhDs, and that kind of stuff. And we ask the folks to watch one of those videos a day too. So it takes them out about 90 days, right? And more than that, it's the, you know, 20, 30 people in each Zoom meeting, or more sometimes. And then the forum itself is just like, dare I say, the most loving community that I've ever been.
oh, that's nice.
You know, it's just people helping other people. Because here's the big thing. Likely, and this is 90 plus, probably closer to 95% of our people are the only ones in their community, not their community, their family, their nuclear family that are doing this.
I bet.
Their kids aren't doing it. Their spouses aren't doing it. So you know, we're tribe animals. We like to do stuff together. We need to do stuff together for it to work. And so the community aspect is just huge, you know.
But are most people, before they decide to make this change, are they feeling some sort of pain in their life that is motivating them? I'm thinking about myself, Mike, because I eat sugar and I know it's not good for me.
Right.
What would motivate me to change? You know, or should I even worry about it?
Well, there's a breakdown that, you know, it's become pretty systematic or pretty predictable, is that about a third of people are sugar addicts.
Right.
They biochemically, when they ingest it, they can't stop, like any other
right.
drug or alcohol issue. And about a third of people are what we call harmful users. You may fall in that category, where if they were to reset, then they could use sugar occasionally. And then a third of people are normies. We all hate them. No, they can drink, they can have a soda, or they can have a half a cookie and leave it there and not think about it for a month, like a person that can do a half a glass of wine or whatever.
Okay.
So that's how it kind of breaks down. But you have to, you know, you make that decision for yourself, just like when you're recovering from drugs and alcohol. And I'll tell you, the answer to your question is, most folks have, and it's the strangest thing, and I don't know how it happened, and all of my contemporaries say the exact same thing. 90+% of our people are women. 90+% of our people are 45 to 80. And it's like, and I like to say 45, might even be higher, but it's at least 30, 40 to 80 kind of thing. And why? We don't know. I think maybe women are smarter than us, John. But I also believe that, you know, weight issues in society are what motivates them usually. They've usually gained a pound or two a year since high school or college. Now they're 30 to, you know, 100 pounds or more overweight. And they know in the diets that they've tried, all of them say reduce the white stuff, right? All of them know that they've tried to quit sugar, and they know its reaction in their body. And so that's what brings them to see us, to motivate them. But remember, most of them come from the $78 billion diet industry. They don't come from the addiction recovery world.
Right.
Like I said, a larger percentage is coming now, but, and I have to literally unbrainwash them. I have to get them to the point that this is not eat less and exercise more. This is substance use disorder recovery. And that, I lose some folks to that because they just don't want to be involved in that, I guess.
No, but I do believe that it is. I know that it is. I mean, there's it's just a fact that it is. I- and I've spoken with a lot of people in OA, secular OA, Overeaters Anonymous, and I wonder how is that how is what you do different from that, or is there any difference?
That's a great question. So I think of myself as a 12-step anthropologist.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, my mentor is a guy named William White. I don't know if you're
Okay,
you should
I
try
know.
on your podcast because he's a brilliant guy. Wrote a lot of books about the history of recovery
Yeah.
way before AA even
Oh, I
existed.
have his encyclopedia.
Yeah, he's a guy. It's like encyclopedic, right?
Yeah.
And the reason I bring that up is because I have studied the food groups inside out and backwards, right? And I know that OA's problem is they do not name an abstinence. That's
That's
their
right.
that's the problem. That you can do whatever you want.
That's
And
right. They define their own abstinence, don't they?
right. And those people suffer for decades, literally. I have a bunch of those people now. And the second groups are the offshoot groups who really discovered the cure. And we have to, but it was anecdotal. It was not scientific. They realized that if they went abstinent, flour, sugar, and caffeine, flour and sugar, that they would, the addiction would be in remission or whatever. And those folks have other strange anomalies, like weighing and measuring. Okay.
Mm.
And what we found is that, over tens of thousands of people, only 10 to 15% are what we call volume addicts. And that is like they figured out how to use the stretch receptors in their stomach to hack the dopamine again. Like back in the day, if you only found food every 2 or 3 days, you need to eat a lot of it, and then it lasts you a couple days, and the body was adapted for that. Well, we don't need that anymore, right?
What are
And
stretch adapters?
it's this not the stretch adapters, it's the stretch receptors. I'm
Oh,
sorry,
what?
wrong. The stretch receptors in our stomach allow the stomach to stretch, and then endorphins kick in, dopamine kicks in, everything kicks in because when we eat to excess and our stomach is bulging and growing, you know what I mean? You're just eating way too much. And it's an evolutionary adaptation that we are hacking in a society where there isn't lack, really, And so weighing and measuring has become an issue that people rebel against in a lot of ways in 12-step stuff. And one last thing I think is this construct that's not involved in any other 12-step groups that I know of, is you can't speak for 90 days in a meeting. And like,
Oh, yeah.
like, where the hell did this come from? It's like they all develop their own new stuff. But and I have nothing against the programs for people. And then, like you and I, the spirituality part is another issue that what we've done in our programs, we have substituted the spiritual science for the spirituality. And we are vehement about it. We do this big summit every year, twice a year, actually, and bring on the world's leading experts and the leading research every time. And so I think that it's look, I love the phrase in recovery, take what you like and leave the rest. And the answer for us is the community is the answer. And the reason, whatever the things that I just mentioned in the food groups that have repelled people, that they've told me why they came to see our group, is that there's a lot of peer-reviewed studies about community of everything. It doesn't matter if it's heart disease, cancer recovery. If you get in a support group, your recovery is much better. Your longevity is much better. So this is proven fact, and that I think has always been the strength of recovery groups.
So you would define abstinence as complete abstinence from sugar, flour?
Yes.
Are those the two main things?
In our group, we do caffeine too.
Caffeine.
We find that about 10 to 15% of people can drink black coffee, but I still don't think it ends well. We don't have enough long-term data for that, but I still don't think it ends well. because it's affecting the same dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. I mean, it's just playing with your brain reward chemicals, and most people, it keeps the cravings alive.
Yeah.
It's like when you get caffeine, your body's thinking, where's the chocolate? Where's the sugar in the coffee? It's like they're very, very intertwined, and the body's not that smart. It doesn't want a sweet taste on your mouth. It wants a dopamine hit.
Right.
What we're looking for with a drink or a drug too. We're not looking for a nasty taste in booze or a shot in our arm. We're looking for that dopamine hit. And when I say, like I said, when I say dopamine, I mean the entire concept.
Exactly.
People know what dopamine is, the others not so much.
I had a doctor tell me that it's not an addiction necessarily to a substance, but it's an addiction to the chemicals in your brain. That's what we're addicted to.
And they're the facilitator. In the sugar world, very proven science that your dopamine receptors are down regulated, they call it, and they're thinned out. You have less of them when you're abusing sugar. And so you're losing, what God or nature, whatever your belief system gave you, 10 million years of evolution gave you, So yeah, it's like I said, it takes about the arc of an interview like this to put all the pieces that took us a decade or two to learn,
Well, I think you've got a great community going. It's amazing that you have as many people as you do. I know that the groups that I've been speaking with, secular OA groups and so forth, they've been growing too, but not to the extent that you have. But you've been doing this for a while too.
Yeah, it's been a while. I mean, sugar addiction's been up for 10 or 12 years.
Yeah.
And the groups themselves have been about 4 or 5 years old, really. I think I started my first meeting Tuesday night, I don't know, 6 years ago, something like that.
Have you noticed an increase since COVID?
Oh, yeah. William White and I wrote an article in 2018 predicting the evolution of recovery. It's called The Future of Recovery. You can look it up.
Oh, wow.
Just put William White, Mike Collins, Future of Recovery in Google. It'll come up. And we predicted this kind of stuff. But what COVID did was it just literally put it on steroids. It accelerated by a decade what was going to happen anyway, because no one could go to meetings of any kind.
Right.
So yeah, it became it was a little chaotic there for a little bit.
And so much easier to find.
Yes.
Find you, and to check it out and say, is this, I'm kind of curious about this. This might be something that could help me.
Everybody goes to Dr. Google, right?
Right. They do.
Yeah.
They do.
So they look it up and they stumble across it. So, and it's easier than, and I don't know if you've been through this, but I know I did when I went to my first couple of meetings. I sat in my car and wondered whether I was going in,
Right. I actually walked to the door for, I think, a week at least and went the other way.
And so, and you can keep your camera off on Zoom and you can take your name out of it and you can be really anonymous for a while, but and see if it's for you, which I like.
So how can people find you and learn more about this?
Sugaraddiction.com. I guess you said it's this is interesting timing for the year, and we should talk about this afterwards, is that we have what we call the world's largest sugar detox starting on January 1st.
Oh, well, tell me about that.
Yeah, it's you've heard people do meditations together or chants or prayer together, whatever. So we all get together and we have all our affiliates and people that health educators and stuff, because a lot of health educators use us to get their folks off sugar and then their protocol, whatever their protocol was, And so we all get together and they go through my 30-day detox. And so, yeah, we call it Sugar-Free January, Sugar-Free in 23. We got all the buzzwords for it. But, and then on the 15th of January, we start the Quit Sugar Summit, which is its 10th anniversary.
Okay.
And that's going to be, you can just go to quitsugarsummit.com and check that out. But the best way to find me is to go to sugaraddiction.com and download the free book. We brought the Amazon book home, and we we gave it, now we give it away for free.
Hmm.
But it'll get you on the email list and notify you of whatever you're interested in. You'll see the emails, whatever. And but the book's free regardless, and you can check it out. It's pretty, it's a lot of people just use the book and the forums, and they do fine. And some people want to get involved in the Zoom meetings or what have you. So there's a little bit for everybody.
I'm going to try your January 1st sugar detox. I'm going to try that. What I like about that is it gives people an opportunity who are curious to say, what would this be like? And the same thing happens like with drinking. They have was it dry January or whatever. And people who are just kind of curious, what would my life be like without alcohol?
Yep.
And they find that, wow, I feel so much better,
Yeah.
that it's even possible not to have this substance in my life.
Yeah. The Sober Curious move is huge now.
I love it. It's great. I like it so much because it takes the stigma and the labeling out of this whole issue. And it really helps people understand that it doesn't really matter. It's just that I want to do something that's healthy, good and healthy for me.
Yeah.
I don't need to put any label on me.
I mean, this is one of my biggest pet peeves, and yours too, I'm sure, is like, we got the biggest nonprofits in the world on K Street, G Street, Washington, D.C., where all the nonprofits are housed, they do a bunch of stuff, whatever, events and trainings. But their main job is to tell the stories of recovering people so that they can reduce the stigma.
Yeah.
And this is what we're doing.
Yes.
We're telling the stories of success stories of people. I mean, I had to hire somebody to start categorizing the success stories because it just took too much time. And we've got thousands of written testimonials of people that got together in the community and found a home. They felt like they were comfortable expressing, because people, like, when you talk to a normal person, they're like, you can have one cookie, don't worry about it. It's only one cookie. I baked it for you, whatever. And so it's hard for folks to put them down for like even 30 days. And we have a lot of folks just like you, like podcast groups and stuff, where they do it with their community. Meaning,
oh, good idea.
Yeah, they put it out to their information for their community, and then they kind of do it, whatever, like I said, their protocol too.
Right.
But they get everybody off sugar,
Wow, that's a good idea. Actually, I think I'm going to do that.
I
mean, this is something that I've always kind of considered, but just recently, my wife and I I've actually lost a lot of weight, but my wife and I just decided not to keep like junk food around. So it's not necessarily focused on sugar, but just not having the crap around, and not having it around. I'm not eating it and feeling better.
That's like rule 1. You can't have a house, man.
Yeah. And I say it's crap, and it is. I mean, I had this experience the other day at work. I walked by this vending machine. I looked at the stuff that's in it, and I honestly had this reaction. I thought, that's not even food. What the hell is that?
It's a chemical experiment. You're right. It's not food.
No.
And, you do have to eat whole food to get off this stuff, which is hard for some folks because it is hard. Out and they're used to boxes and bags and cans and warming stuff up.
Yeah.
So you do have to cook a little, sort of. I mean, not sort of, you do.
Yeah, you do. But that could actually be enjoyable. I have a friend of mine who enjoys the process of just preparing food. For her, it's meditative, just to chop vegetables or whatever.
Me too. I find it's really the only time where I'm out of my brain. It's like I don't have
You're focused on that activity.
On it, right? That and gardening. It's like I'm not thinking about work or money or whatever. I'm thinking about just that.
And you're doing something that's good for you.
All religious say, I'm in the moment,
Yeah. So is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we left out, that we didn't cover?
Not really. He did a great job, like kind of walking me through the history, not so much my history, but the history of the evolution. What I believe is more of a movement than it is, anything. and it's going to take time. I have to, I guess what I would say is that I'd like to future pace people a little bit, meaning you have to pull back a little bit. Like you said, like what would it be like for 30 days without it kind of thing. But you have to look at it like seatbelts in cars, drinking and driving, smoking in public places, condoms in bathrooms. In our lifetime, all of these things have changed societally, stigma-wise. They've all changed, right? Everything is different. Like smokers are now aliens from another planet, if they're standing outside the building. When I was young, drinking and driving was just pat you on the head, don't get
exactly
caught.
same. Mm-hmm.
Now you get caught drinking and driving, you are a social pariah. You know what I mean? And you used to be able to smoke in the back of planes.
We smoked everywhere.
Yeah, I smoked at restaurants. You go to a restaurant, you're like, all your clothes are terrible, So all that's changed in our lifetime. We've got to see the evolution. And I guarantee you that 50 years from now, they're going to say, they used to give sugar to kids, right? It's going to be a completely different world only because of the science. They're going to prove, and they already have, but
yes.
Most people don't know about it. For the first time in history, there was a little bit of a change in the food pyramid where they said 0 added sugar for children under 5.
Interesting.
0. So there's been some changes, but they're slow, Yeah. But I just want people to realize that if they're thinking about this, their kids and their grandkids are going to be bragging on them in 10 years saying mom was way ahead of this thing,
Well, Mike, you're a huge asset to the recovery community. Thank you for everything that you're doing. I'm glad that I talked with you. I'm very fortunate doing this podcast because I get to speak with therapists and people that bring information to me that I might not have gotten otherwise, and kind of helps me improve, So thank you for that. And I know it'll help my listeners here too as well.
I love that. Do those interviews. I think you're right. And I always say to myself, if I get my questions answered, everything else goes fine. It's like I'm just trying to learn more myself.
Well, it was so nice to see you again. And let's not wait 3 or 4 years next time that you come on.
Please.
Okay. And I'm going to definitely attend that thing in January. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, for sure.